In a faraway slice of the megaverse, the inhabitants of Flova are preparing for a mission to a mysterious, primitive planet. What they find there will change the course of their history forever. And maybe yours too. Put on some headphones and harness the power of your imagination with the illustrated podcast, Flovatar, a Dust Odyssey.
Nick ran towards the sound. Gellin and Franklin followed. Fasco, however, was halted by Floyd, holding her arm and repeating,
"It's time to look for dust."
You don't look for dust. You don't beat me to the incinerator."
At this, Floyd hurried, overtaking the others. Floyd opened the door and a wave of heat enveloped them. All was dark, apart from a subtle orange glow from the far side of the hall. Fasco grabbed Gellin's arm.
"What is that monster?"
Shh,
Gellin replied.
don't want to wake it up.
The light shone through the door onto a purple-skinned Flovan, who was leisurely floating on the garbage like he was on vacation at the beach. Gellin's voice was quiet, but urgent.
Hey there, hang on, I'll try and get you out.
Nah, no need, bruv. I mean, it's hotter than Biosphere 66 and it smells like a likey eats too many fuzzle tacos, but I found something important in here.
Paul answered, holding up a colorful artifact toward the group of Flovans. He fingered the splintered glass object with dark, sticky plant leaves stuck to its insides. He pressed one end to his nose and inhaled deeply, smiling a goofy grin. Gellin shouted now.
Paul, it's you? Are you serious? You're stuck in there and all you're worried about is some worthless earth trash?
"Shh,
Fasco said, pointing at the slumbering incinerator.
it's just a machine."
Franklin said to her, after consulting her Philosophlo. Fasco blushed.
Fluke, this planet is rank. How are you all not passed out from the smell?
Paul said, wrinkling his newly triangular nose.
"The smell?
Fasco asked.
You're not worried about that thing?"
She pointed to the orange light, now powering up. Paul turned around before screaming,
For Flogolly's sake, get me the fluke out of here!
and at that, the incinerator seemed to awaken, churning the pit of miscellaneous combustible garbage.
"I'll try to find a way to shut it off."
Franklin ran up metal stairs to a group of controls and frantically started pressing buttons.
We need to get to him.
Nick yelled. Gellin was frozen in place. Fasco shook his arm, and for a moment, she thought Gellin was paralyzed. Nick looked around and noticed an extension cord that had been missorted, picked out, and left. He grabbed it.
We can try this. It's rubber. Shouldn't snap.
It's what?
Gellin said, shaking himself back to reality. Anyone could see at a glance it wasn't enough. But Gellin tied it around his waist, giving as much slack as he could, and handed the other end to Fasco.
Give this to the droid.
"Don't hold this as hard as you can."
She said, handing Floyd the cord.
"Now, let go."
It worked. The droid held the cord in his vice-like hand. Meanwhile, Franklin's button pushing was yielding unintended results. The shutters to the vents opened and closed. The lights turned on and off, and a loud alarm blared throughout the enclosure, piercing their Flovan ears. Gellin jumped into the swirling mass. The pushing current of the garbage to the fire dragged at him as he tried to swim and tread toward the helpless Flovan. It grew stronger the closer he got to the center. A misstep, and he tripped, falling under a wave of shredded Amazon packaging. Nick noticed and grabbed Floyd's free hand before the sudden tug reached the droid. He strained with the weight.
FL01D! Let go of my hand!
Floyd squeezed Nick's fingers, nearly breaking his bones. Franklin chose to focus on dials and levers instead of buttons. Maybe she could slow it down. She pulled a lever. A huge claw started to slowly descend from the ceiling. Paul screamed in anticipated anguish.
"Sorry."
She shouted, and returned the lever to its original position. Counterintuitively, it didn't stop falling, but instead started opening and closing like grasping metal jaws of death.
"It's going to eat him."
Fasco screamed. She noticed Nick getting closer and closer to the rim of the pit. She took off her belt and refastened it so she was bound to a steel beam. As Nick tipped over the edge, she launched herself forward and grabbed his ankles. Gellin could reach Paul with the extra length. He fastened them to him with a cord, and signaled to be pulled out.
That's not happening, Gellin.
Nick wheezed to him, upside down. Gellin looked up and noticed the severity of the situation. He took a deep breath before trying to fight the solid current of trash blocking them from escaping. It was hopeless. With all his strength, he only managed to keep them in the same position. He turned and put up his fists, as if he were going to gallantly fight the incinerator.
Franklin!
He called up to her at the controls.
I don't know if I can do anything about this. It's up to you.
He pleaded.
You can do this, Ray.
She told herself under her breath.
All tech, no matter how alien and primitive, has the same basic electronics.
She bent down and started to search for a power source of some kind. Instead, she only found a half-finished, half-hidden glass bottle of brown liquid. She smelled it and nearly passed out. Shaking her head, she examined the covering panel to the controls. Pulling out her multi-pen, she placed it on a screw head holding the casing. It glowed violet and contoured to fit the shape perfectly before automatically pulling and turning the screw out. After doing the same with the rest, she threw off the panel.
Yes, unprotected raw circuiting. Now to give this thing a drink.
Franklin opened the liquid and poured it inside the machine. A sizzle, crack, spit a spark, and the machine stopped. She ran down to help the others out. Minutes later, they all lay breathless around the pit when the rescued Paul rolled over, gagged, and ran to the door to escape the stench. Outside, the stench seemed to have followed him by clinging to his nostrils. He put a hand to his nose in disgust, but jumped when he felt his face. That was not his nose. It had changed to something more upturned and triangular. Distracted at last from the smell, then Paul also noticed the mint green lock of hair drop into view instead of his signature dark brown dreads. Gellin came out as soon as he regained his strength.
Paul, are you okay?
Paul looked up.
Okay. Nah, I'm not okay. My nose must be broken.
The fluke is wrong with my hair.
And your eyes. Are my eyes weird?
No, but your hair's green, and your skin is...
He took a glove off Paul's hand.
Purple?
Paul gasped at the slightly spotted, deep purple hand.
They didn't warn us about this.
He said with a bitter chuckle.
Well, of course they didn't.
We didn't know.
Franklin joined them, followed by Fasco, Floyd, and Nick.
Franklin.
She held up her hand to his hand, but he ignored it. She slowly lowered it, and then said,
All right then. We need to start dust collection as quickly as possible.
You all on dust collection too? What are the chances of that?
Paul exclaimed with sarcastic enthusiasm.
I don't think that's so urgent at the moment, though.
It is if you want to get home.
She said, in a firm tone.
You put the whole group in danger just now, by the way.
They locked eyes, and he sheepishly pulled out his handheld dust detector. The others followed suit and introduced themselves as they tried to make sense of the readings. The dials were whizzing all over the place. Some acted like distracted likies, constantly wanting to check out new and better things. They split up, following the ever-changing directions, and so Gellin got a solid lead. Something dust-rich was close and strong enough to overrule any other readings. He pursued the signal and came upon a great epicenter of dust.
Everyone, come quick!
Gellin called out to the others, and they rushed around him. Franklin used her detector near the powerful object.
Oh, you found something really special. I've never seen readings this high before.
They all stared at the object in wonder. It was in far from perfect condition. Semi-deflated, partially dented, a faded basketball lay sickly on the trash heap. The group looked at it, unimpressed, but the readings spoke for themselves. Franklin used her dust detector, turning on the mod that gives the age of origin of the dust. A series of numbers was projected in a continuous ring about the grid screen. 06141998. A scribbled group of letters moved in a continuous writing and erasing motion. Franklin could faintly make out an M and a J.
This was probably a greatly revered artifact.
Franklin made note of the date. Paul grimaced and tapped it with his boot. Then he sneezed.
What do you think you're doing?
Franklin yanked him away from the object.
You saw how much dust energy is in this thing? It could blow for all we know.
Actually, when it's an unprocessed raw form, it is exceptionally stable.
Nick reassured the group and picked up the ball.
It's something about the extraction process that makes it volatile. I think this ball was once touched by the man they call the Goat here on Earth.
Franklin stared at Nick, like she was now searching for someone in his face.
I didn't know engineers delved into dust theory.
Franklin took the ball out of Nick's hands and pulled out a specimen bag from her suit to store it in. Everyone turned to look at Nick.
I don't think that ball's gonna fit.
He stuttered.
I got it.
Muttered Franklin. She did not. The specimen bag tore, and Franklin huffed before absent-mindedly walking to Floyd.
Floyd, keep this until we're ready for safe extraction.
Throwing him the ball, she walked back to the wide-eyed others.
Why did you do that?
They asked incredulously.
What?
She paused.
Fluke!
Franklin turned around, but it was too late. Floyd had charged up for a long-range throw with a run-up and launched the ball into the sky until it disappeared into a small twinkle.
Don't feel bad. I'm more of a Lakers fan myself.
Nick waved his hand over Franklin's shoulder, pointing beyond the heaps of garbage.
Let's get out of here. If you're looking for dust, well, this is a literal dump. If there's stuff here, there will be more from the source.
But what about the train state pods?
Franklin exclaimed over the sound of Paul gagging in the background.
We can't just leave them here.
They each retrieved their pods and stored them in a small, blue shack at the end of the dump. Paul wasn't the only one who was retching from the smell anymore. Franklin's eyes watered as she took the coordinates down.
Now where?
Fasco said, looking worriedly from side to side. Paul snorts.
Call yourself a navigation officer. You can't even decide where to walk without AT.
Gellin stood up to him, eye to eye.
Leave her alone.
Let's try to find another dust-rich source.
Franklin pulled out her detector. It didn't take long before a clear directional path formed from the beeping dots on the dust detectors. They followed it past rows of industrial warehouses and peeked inside the loading doors. Franklin made notes.
Huge amounts of space and resources go into the sorting and distribution of
She touched her glasses and zoomed in on the perfectly stacked crates.
socks. Seems poor Earthlings have yet to realize that socks are one of the only objects that can fall into different dimensions on their own if separated for too long.
Nick felt a nagging in the back of his mind. Weren't there 6 sparks that came crashing to Earth? Maybe he had miscounted. Exiting the dump, the Flovans walked along a road with 2 lanes on each side and marveled at the various shapes, colors, and sizes of cabby capsule-like vehicles speeding past them, secured to the ground with rubber circles. Fasco looked at them in wonder. They were all so different. How could these all be regulated? And how did they know whose turn it was to go? They continued their trek, closely following the dust trail like a psyche-lucky when its owner is eating birthday puffs. Gellin and Franklin led the pack, followed by Nick, Fasco, Floyd, and a disgruntled Paul at the back. He covertly took a sniff of his treasured glass artifact every 50 paces, which seemed to make the dust smell tolerable. While taking another long sniff, he was hit with something wet on his forehead.
Gel, can you chill with the exaggerated stories of your bravery? You're talking so loud, you spit on me.
Gellin turned around to retort, but before he could, he was hit in the eye with another wet droplet. Fasco looked at the sky again, in fear.
Watch out!
They each tried to dodge the falling droplets, briefly turning the sidewalk into an impromptu dance floor with their jerking and twerking, but as the number of droplets increased, they became impossible to avoid. So with resigned trepidation, they waited to see if their soaked skin would begin to melt.
It can't hurt you.
Nick explained to the others.
Earthlings call this rain. I've read about it. They sing in it, dance in it, and it can create something called a rainbow.
Franklin held out her hand and caught droplets until they created a small pool.
Extraordinary.
She whispered.
This planet is full of surprises. I'm not sure how anyone here knows what to wear when they leave their homes in the morning.
Before they could become too soggy, they spotted a bridge and hid under it until the rain was merely trickling out of the clouds. Gradually, the sky cleared to reveal an arc of glorious colors that seemed to start and end at opposite sides of the earth. They all stared in amazement at this earthly wonder. Paul's usual sarcastic smirk was replaced with a genuine smile.
I could look at this forever,
crooned Fasco.
Should we try to find where it ends?
No, we should get moving. Flagoli only knows what other things can come out of the sky at night.
Franklin gently put her arm on Fasco's shoulder.
I wonder where all the other Flovans landed. I hope they're safe.
As the giant star that Franklin identified as the sun was finishing its descent into the earth, the dust detectors directed them to turn down a particularly dim alley. Paul paused at the front of a restaurant that had a neon sign indicating it was open 24 hours. The hours in an Earth day, according to Philosophy. He peered in and saw several Earthlings that reminded him of the locals back on Sphere 16. Gellin and Nick continued to follow the dust trail, passing a store with bars on the windows. Gellin stopped in his tracks as he caught the sight of what had to be millions of different products. How could anyone choose between so many options? Before they could continue on the dust trail, a human stumbled out of the store, holding a brown bag in his hand in the shape of a bottle. He was drinking out of it at an alarming rate and belching. He spotted the Flovans, and they froze. He sauntered over to them, nearly tripping.
Hey there. We all got a lot.
The human slurred. Franklin spoke to the others through gritted teeth.
What is he asking?
None of them would dare answer, but Gellin flipped on his translation device.
Of course you don't.
He said, after another drink.
Oh, you kids smoke those vapes nowadays. Terrible for your lungs. What are you all dressed up as anyway? Is this some sort of trend? Or, I don't know, you're all coming back from that new Avatar movie. We're Flovans, and we'll be going now.
Gellin said, as bravely as possible.
What? I thought you were avatars. Flovatars? That's what you mean? Flovatars?
The man said, roaring in laughter. He turned around, and they saw a familiar golden liquid entering the glass bottle. This was certainly not rain. Nick quietly tiptoed forward and pulled Gellin's Philosophy out of his pocket.
Hey, friend,
Nick called to the belligerent man.
here's a light for you.
He tossed it down the alley, and the man went blundering after it. They ran before he could turn back around. Gellin whacked Nick on the arm, mid-stride.
Why did you throw that away? I'll need that.
I kind of like that name.
Nick smirked, not answering Gellin's question.
Flovatars. Has a nice sound to it.
The dust detectors started worrying and singing when they passed one particular door. On the side of the building, there was a door with a neon sign over it. Nostalgic Electronics. The end of the dust trail. Franklin pulled out her multi-use pen so they could gain entry. The door swung open, and without missing a beat, Gellin stepped inside first.
This place has to be illegal,
remarked Gellin. As they entered behind him, the rest of the group gasped at shelves and shelves of vintage Earthling technology, from Moog synthesizers to Polaroid cameras. Behind the counter was a lit display of unique electronics made through tinkering, modding, and innovation from an amalgamation of retro gadget parts. Suddenly, the Flovans jumped as a low, deep voice roared,
Get over here!
Back at the dump, a gray, shaved head peeked out of a heaping pile of trash.
Hello? Is anyone else around? Flurk.
Rebus shook off a baby diaper from his foot and swatted away a fly as he stepped out of the trash and onto the soggy earth. Powering on his gleam streamer, he started to point it toward a pile of Beanie Babies before he shook his head.
No one wants to watch a live stream of trash.
He wandered around until he found a small boot print, unmistakably Flovan. He started his streamer again, and from his back pocket, he pulled out a sleek cube and pointed it toward the print. After a few beeps, the cube displayed a neon pathway on its screen, and he started to follow the prints. Around the recycling and out of the dump.